What is up, everybody? My name is Alex, and welcome to the Broth, the most fun, serious show on the internet. We're here live in the Cauldron, and today we're going to be talking about my favorite subject and why I need a podcast, and most of you other podcast having mofos don't need one, but I do. I know there's a lot of them. I'm competing with like a gazillion people. But there's a big motivation I have for creating this podcast or show or whatever, this live stream. And that is that I have a very strong point of view. And I sort of lost track of that a little bit because there's so much going on with politics. But my purpose here isn't really to talk about politics or Trump. There's much bigger fish to fry here. And I was meditating on this the last couple of shows, how they weren't my best, the last two, and I had kind of some of my momentum and energy had faded, and I was like, what am I doing again? And I was like, oh yeah, I need to talk about how 600 years my German Catholic ancestors were basically right about everything, and not individually speaking, but as a people, they were right, and as were the Italians and the Spanish and all of Christendom. Before the Reformation, we had it down, we had it nailed, and that's why we were building the most beautiful architecture and most beautiful art ever known to mankind, because we knew the truth, we were inspired by the truth. Of course, God's creation contains mystery beyond our comprehension, at least our current comprehension, and certainly God himself is infinite and unknowable by us, before death, and even when we are with him in heaven, we will never fully be able to comprehend him. But that's why heaven will be heaven in a large respect, is we will spend an eternity getting to know God, and it's going to be amazing. We are going to get into kind of the whole of my worldview, and many of these things will be explored more deeply as the show progresses. But today I'm going to focus on the nature of authority through history and what that means for what our government should look like, how authority is given by God to man. But I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other things that are essential to this worldview, which will be explored in greater depth later. So that's, before I get into the highbrow stuff, I want to have a little fun. Two things that just made me laugh in the last 24 hours. One, a video of Sam Hyde skit that my buddy showed me today, and also just a thread on X where the comments had me dying. So that'll be fun, and then we'll get into it. And I learned something in creating this. It's going to be good when, in making the notes, I learned new things, and I'm really inspired by what I learned. This is the path to restoring Christendom in America. Now, America was founded as anti-monarchy, and so unlike Europe and Russia, which can just return to its roots, it's a little bit more complicated for America. However, the solution to that actually ties all of history together in a beautiful narrative arc. And I just figured this out a few minutes ago, and I'm convinced that I'm a genius, and as usual, and that I'm right about this. And please, somebody humble me and tell me how this is wrong. But everything I'm going to cover today that hasn't happened yet with. And it's not about me. I'm really, God revealed these truths to me as a blessing, so I can pass them on. So, and many others, and to many others. So, let's have some fun for real quick. So, this is Sam Hyde. It's a short skit, so it should be fun. Here we go.
One people, one planet. Can you see what I see?
We are one people.
We are one people.
United,
in a social movement.
We are one people.
United in a social movement.
I'm Sam Hyde, and this is the Toss It Project. The premise is simple. Just take the most hurtful thing anyone's ever said to you and write it down on a styrofoam cup. And just toss it.
This is from
Toss
6
that.
years ago.
Just throw it. Boom, boom.
And when this type of
Playground,
thing,
school,
this type of thing
river,
is really happening.
any place. Just throw it out. You got an iPhone? Record yourself and upload it to social media. Boom! You're gonna be famous. Friend requests from all the top
There's just one
celebrities.
person who would do this.
Cowboy.
So I'm paying it forward today.
The whole world is
Just
stop
throws it in the
bullying
back.
right now. Boom! Yo, it's 2016. And if you're not cool with homosexuals in your schools teaching your kids about butt sex,
9 years ago.
peace. Because hate is whack, dude. My race is done. You're inheriting the
Call him
earth,
Tim
along with
Broth.
some other undesirables. And that's cool, bro. High five. But check it out. Just
Popped up
remember who built
gum.
this place, all right? Remember to pay homage to the white man.
Race
Thank you,
calculation.
whitey. Yo, but you're better.
I didn't see that the first
We are
time.
one people, united in a social movement.
We can all be victims. Whoosh.
Oh, good stuff, man. My buddy Friendly was vindicated on Sam Hyde. At first, I didn't like him. I don't know. I was just tired of political comedy for a long time. But wait,
And if you're not
When's
cool
the
with
part?
it, dude, my race is done. You're inheriting the earth, along with some other undesirables. And that's cool, bro. High five.
my race is done. You're inheriting the earth, along with some other undesirables. But that's cool, bro. High
But
five.
check it out. Just remember who built this place, all right? Remember to pay homage to the white man. Thank you, whitey. Yo, but you're better.
Oh, I love it. All right. Yeah, let's look at this real quick. So this made me laugh. There's a CNN poll. The Democratic Party's favorability ratings stand at 29%, a record low in CNN's polling dating back to 1992, a drop of 20 points since January 2021. 29% favorable, 54% unfavorable. So that's good news for us. The Democratic Party is collapsing, very deservedly and belatedly in many respects. But let me get back in here. I'm sorry, I got distracted here. How do I see? Oh, yeah, that's not. All right, we're learning YouTube Studio here. I was trying to see. Here, go there. Okay, there we go. Now we're cooking. Okay. What the heck am I talking about? Jeez Louise. Oh, yeah. So, favorability of Democrats is collapsing, but the funny thing about this poll is here we have never heard of the Democratic Party. There's 2% in January 9th through 12th, 2025, now back down to only 1%. So this person highlighted the 1% that never heard of them, and the comments were just had me laughing. Giga Chad, I've never even heard of the Democratic Party. IQ test, your IQ 4, profound mental retardation, but he's a Giga Chad. I vote for the Elephant Party because elephants are bigger than donkeys, says the Giga Chad. Giga Chad, Mexican, faces illiterate illegals picking up the phone, no les conozco. 1% to 2% of the country has achieved political nirvana. Good for them. Democrats, never heard of them. Live look at me answering the poll with Democrats, never heard of them. This guy says, Jesus, I see what you've done for other people, and I want that for me. This person's trying to ruin all the fun. Says everyone's saying based, but it's just immigrants who can't speak English. Can we have a little fun there, buddy? Democratic Party, never heard of that. Either they're based or need to be deported. Could be both. How did it go up and then down a bit? Demo what? Never heard of him. Pepe. I've never been more jealous of another person. Democrats. Sorry, not sure about that one, champ. Party. Do they have free drinks? So you guys get the idea. So yeah, good times. Yeah, let's get into the meat of this thing. And this is where it gets exciting. So the whole of my view here. I got, let's see. I got 10 points here. One, and this is primary, is the Bible is literally the Word of God. Christianity is true, but that when the people have lost the plot and they're calling whatever they don't like in the Bible a metaphor. There are metaphors in the Bible. There are parables in the Bible. It's very clear which ones those are, and it isn't the ones that disagree with your 7th grade science teacher or with Hollywood or your desire to sin or the current, current trendy morality of wokeness or whatever else. The Bible is the literal Word of God. God literally inspired man, many authors to write something that all fits together beautifully, literally guided the Catholic Church, the Universal Church, to tell us what are the books of the Bible. And he did that so we would have it. And he wants us to have it. And it's his word. And in a sense, we talk about Christ as the Word of God and the Word of God creating the universe. God speaking the universe into existence. This is all very profound, very, very important. And over time, Catholics included, in some ways, especially compared to some other sects of Christianity in modern times, have really gotten away from this, and we got to get back to it. Now that includes Garden of Eden literally happened. Adam and Eve, literally the beginning of humanity. The flood literally happened. There's a tremendous amount of evidence for that. There's evidence that the Garden of Eden really happened. It's outside of the scope of this stream, but we'll get into over time all of this stuff. There is genetic evidence of the Garden of its everybody starting with 2 human beings. There's genetic evidence of the flood. There's a tremendous amount of geographical evidence of the flood, of what do you call that when you study the land and the rocks? Geological is what I meant. Evidence of the flood. The resurrection literally happened. We have evidence for that. Now, I'm going to remind you that I didn't come, or maybe tell you for the first time, I didn't come to any of this as being brought up in it. My mom became Christian when I was 8. My dad was Jewish. My mom didn't teach me that any of this literally happened. I don't think she believes in the literal interpretation of much of this. I came to this through the study of evidence. And I ended up, God blessed me with a deep faith, a strong faith, because he revealed his truth to me through studying of evidence, and then that coincided with, and I'm sure many of you resonate with this, that coincided with a spiritual awakening and a spiritual, not of the mind, but of the senses and of the spirit, realization that what I was looking at was true. And that is to say, just those, like, people think that nobody could possibly think that. I'm not telling you this because I'm so interesting or important. People don't think that anybody can think this without having been raised in it. It's like the cult that, but that's not the case. The future, second coming. These are all physical, historical events that really happened. So that is a part of my worldview. And it seems like crazy now, but all of our ancestors believed this. If you're from the West, if your ancestors were Christian in pre-modern times, they all took this for granted as the truth. And it's no coincidence that they built the most spectacular stuff ever built when they knew that. That includes also cosmology, the separation of the waters above from the waters below, the firmament, the earth standing still and being unmoving, which is like there's 20 verses that say that. Heaven above us, we're rejecting relativity, we're rejecting the globe. You can't have above if some people are standing upside down, but to them it's right side up. It's relativity. The idea that it gets into physics, all this physics, new modern physics, is you can create a hypothetical model and operate within it and create a coherent logic to it. It doesn't mean that it's so. So when Einstein's talking about there's all motion is relative and all that stuff, we're rejecting all of this. And these weren't new truths that were discovered. These were deceptions that people fell for. And also, so we've been told that all of what I just told you has been proven wrong. It has not. It has not. I'll give you one quick example of how we've been told that the globe, or that the flat earth was, and I don't call it the flat earth. I call it biblical cosmology because that's what it is. They told you that that the ancient Greeks proved not only that we're on a globe, but that could measure the circumference of the earth. What they did was measure the circumference of the circle at the equator around the North Pole. And the way that they proved it using the shadow of the sun equally works with a small local sun, which is what we believe in, very much what the Bible tells us, not a millions of miles away giant sun. So I'll get more into that at some point with some visual aids because it's hard to visualize. But same with the boats disappearing bottom up over the horizon. Well, zoom lenses, you can watch a boat disappear over the quote-unquote horizon. There is a horizon, but it's visual, not physical. Over the curvature, they say, and then you zoom in on it and you can see it again. So, and that's you can take every single proof of all of these things. We proved the Shroud of Turin. It was a fabrication. Well, they lied, and we now have evidence that it is legitimate. Okay, so that's number one. Christianity is literally true, and when I say that, I mean the Christianity of our ancestors. Pre-schism, one church, one understanding, the truth. Number two, everything that they told us about the Middle Ages and Dark Ages practically is a lie. The Middle Ages and Dark Ages were not a superstitious, oppressive, dark time period full of nothing but famine and disease and oppression. It's the opposite of that. Now, the world is always full of suffering. The world is always full of sin and problems. But when you compare Christendom, which is what that time period and place is really called, to any other time period, whether we're going back to the ancient ages or today, it is by far the most joyful, beautiful time to be alive ever. At least in Europe it was. If you're living where you're living under a king and that king kneels to Jesus Christ, the most beautiful, joyous time to be alive. And there's good things about all time. So even this dark period, which I believe is Satan's little season, which I'm still researching on that. I'm not super confident on that and how it works. There's been some big deceptions in the timeline. But now there's great things about being alive now. I'm having a ball. But at the same time, my heart breaks for just how evil the world is today. Our ancestors built the most beautiful buildings, most beautiful art, because they were inspired by Christ and by the faith. and never were they more inspired by Christ and by the faith as the Middle Ages, which is why they built the most beautiful stuff. You don't build beautiful things. You're not empowered by being inspired by a lie. You might build some cool stuff, but you're not building St. Peter's Basilica. 3, the Catholic Church is the church founded by God, and history since then has been the tension between Satan and his minions' attempt to destroy the church and the church attempting to remain holy and whole in spite of the attacks and the sins of the human beings in it. Number 4, monarchy is the system of rule that was inspired by the hierarchy of heaven. Divine right is real. When Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne as emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, it was a legitimate act of God's authority as delegated to the Pope by Christ himself through St. Peter. Every other form of government is illegitimate. The only legitimate authority in the universe is God's authority, and the only way that man has authority is as delegated by God to people. Now, that's not to say that the only authority is through the Vatican. A man has authority, God-given, as described in the Bible, over his family. But democracy is not a valid form of authority. It doesn't create authority. Man cannot create authority. Man was a created being. So, monarchy is the only legitimate system. Now, it's not the only system that's been any good. There have been other systems, and we'll talk about them, that are, a lot better than other ones. But they're not legitimate if they don't have divine right. That is the nature of legitimacy. That's what legitimacy means. Number 5, nearly all of modern and liberal thought, I'll say all of modern and liberal thought, it does not represent a coherent worldview. They are nothing but attacks on the one coherent worldview, which is the worldview of our forefathers that I'm laying out today. The institutions, it's attacks on the institutions, it's attacked on the traditions, it's an attack on the philosophy that has its roots. You can get from nothing to the worldview I'm talking about. There's an understanding about how the nature of God. There's understanding about how creation came into existence. Modern view does not have that. They cannot explain why anything exists. Throw it away. Throw all of it away. We are rejecting all of it. Liberalism, pluralism, tolerance, democracy, the concept of human rights, rights that we have that exist because we're human outside of some divine authoritative force giving us these rights. These are all made. This is all made up stuff. It's not even a real system. It's just a group of ideas that what they have in common is they're all attacking the system that built the West, that built the most beautiful, that was built by inspiration it was built by people inspired by the truth and by Christ himself. So I'll extrapolate on that a little bit. Here's why tolerance and pluralism need to be tossed out. Okay, a group, as God created groups on the earth, is He created different peoples, and each people have a way that they think. They have values that are God imbued in them. They then, when they understand the truth in Christ, they know everything that they need to know in order to govern themselves. a great leader emerging from those people and inspiring those people is all that is needed to make history, not ideas, not arguments about ideas, not never-ending disputations of different opinions. That is not how you come to the truth. You do not come to the truth or the right thing to do by battling ideas against each other. As Catholics, we know the difference between right and wrong. Many Christians that are not Catholics, for the most part, know the difference between right and wrong. Most things are not gray area. Almost nothing is. So being a people, and this goes for the French, for the Germans, for the English, or the Anglos, more accurately, the Nigerians, the pluralism is introducing, well, there could be many things that could be right. There could be many ideas, and it turns the people against itself. Tolerance is the idea that we need to tolerate all sorts of ideas. No, we don't. No, we don't. If you're a foreigner and you have different ideas than a people and you're in their land and you don't like the intolerance, you can go home. If you're a peasant and you live under a monarch and you don't like something about the way things are run, you don't have to like it. You don't have the right to try to get other people to... You don't have the right to try to spread your ideas if your ideas are against the truth. You don't have there's no divine right to lie. Lying is a sin. You don't have a divine right to sin. You don't have a divine right to be free to sin. And often that's what liberty means. Now, the modern concept of liberty means freedom to sin. The way that we think of liberty often as men having the right, and women, people having the right to do certain things. Many of those things you had every right to do under the strictest of Catholic monarch, but you didn't have the right to sin. And you didn't have the right necessarily to there's a lot of things you might not have had the right to do. And we're obsessed with liberty and having the right to do things. You don't have the way that the Catholic Church traditionally views liberty is best explained by Bishop Williamson in his 10-part series on there's 4 out of the 10 parts are the Catholic view of liberty. What Catholicism seeks is to create a environment in which the subjects, and this is the monarchy as well, these are 2 pillars of the West, in which the subjects have the ability to live a godly life. That means that other oligarchs don't have the right to exploit them, which is fundamentally the source of liberty. I would say that, or one of the two. There's 2 sources of the push for liberty. One is sinners' desire to have the right to sin, and the other, which is tied to it, is powerful people who don't have the divine right, who want the right to exploit the people. And traditionally, the king would stop them from doing that. They did not have the right to do that. Today, hardly anybody's stopping anybody. Today, corporations can exploit people in most ways. And there is a small amount of power still in the United States of the federal government to prevent that. And that what's left of it comes from what I'm talking about. Is the legacy is what I'm talking about. And there is a way that we can trace a valid approach and understanding of power from Rome to the United States, and it is that trajectory taken forward that can get us to where we need to be under Christ, and without needing ever an anti-American movement, and without having to reject many of the principles of without having to reject the principles of the American Revolution that were Christian. You just have to reject Freemasonry and continue the ship forward and there's a path, and I'll get to it. And that is the most exciting part of all of this, in my opinion. Now, another thing people should understand, one of the things we really value about America, the American dream, upward mobility. And many people believe that this is in stark contrast to the ancient feudal kingdoms of the Holy Roman Empire, that there was no upward mobility during that time, which means that there's no meritocracy, right? And we could all understand intrinsically that there is a benefit to meritocracy because it encourages people to act in a meritorious fashion. That if you act in a meritorious fashion, then you can move up in the world, and that's a good system of incentives. That did exist during the Christian monarchies, and I'll explain it in a story. And when you hear this, you'll understand how true it is. And the real place where there's no upward mobility is where the global satanic order would like to take us, where there are basically a global slave state. In that there's no meritocracy, there's no upward mobility, and we're seeing that happen already, where things like diversity, equity, inclusion are destroying meritocracy. And a lot of conservatives want to go back to the meritocracy, but they still view it as something that is antithetical to the ancient monarchies, the Christian monarchies, and it isn't. So here's an example. You're born to the poorest family in your village. Back then, the feudal peasants didn't own property. They were given property by the lords to work it, and then they would work the land, and they would have food, and depending on how good they are at working the land, had most of what that was mostly how well they would eat. So the way that you would be extra poor would be in a time of famine or drought or something like this, which is sort of irrespective of the family you come from. That's just true at any time. Or B, how good your family was at working the land, how functional they were. Were they drunks? So, okay, you're growing up, you're born into, short of orphans, one of the worst situations you can be born into, which is, your family are drunks and they're terrible at growing food. And so, everybody's giving some of the food to the lords, and that's how value that's their sort of taxes. So you grew up in a poor family, but you have you have promise, right? You have ambition to do better than your parents, and you see what they're doing, and you want something better for yourself. You at some point walk by the blacksmith of the village, and he's a skilled blacksmith, and you see the work he's doing, and you think it's beautiful and amazing, and you say, I want to do that. So you form a relationship with this blacksmith, and you carry out his trash, and you sweep, and you become his little lackey, and you eat up all of the knowledge that he can give you. Eventually, he lets you become his apprentice, and he starts formally training you on how to do this, and you learn a trade, and you're inspired, and you love it, and you start working on something that is beyond the capability of the person teaching you, and something maybe resembling this gold breastplate that you see in the background here. So you're building something like that, and you then see the noble lord go by, and you've made it as a gift for him, and you give it to him, and the noble lord recognizes your talents and decides to help you learn more. So he sends you to a really talented blacksmith or goldsmith who teaches you the finest ways of doing it, the best techniques. You dedicate your life to this and tirelessly work until you have created one of the most beautiful breastplates or helms or shields or swords that anybody has seen in the area. And you ask your local lord's permission to give it as a gift to the king. Now, maybe this works out for you, maybe it doesn't, but maybe it takes a couple generations. You teach all of this stuff to your sons. At some point, somebody gives this to the king. The king makes them their official blacksmith or goldsmith, and from there, then you display bravery in a battle, and the king grants you some lands, and now you're a family, and you went from the poorest of the poor to owning land and governing a whole area. That sort of thing happened. Most of the aristocratic families trace their roots back to something like that. They were regular people. So that's the blacksmith route. You have the straight up warrior route. You have the smart person who learns how to read and starts writing things and then becomes a scribe for the king and all of that. So there was totally upward mobility. And it was actually like you actually had to provide value. You had to do something amazing. You couldn't sell NFTs or run a webcam, girl cam business or something. So that's just an example of how this time period has been grossly miscategorized as something that it wasn't. So as I mentioned, there are other systems that can be better or worse, even if they're not legitimate in terms of having divine authority. Before the Christian kings, there were the despots belonging to false religions. There were also the kings of the Hebrews that are in Kings, the Old Testament, such as King David. And they're sort of a special case. But all over the world, there were, the king of Persia and the king of Babylon and this sort of things. And this is not analogous because they did not know the truth and they were despots belonging to false gods and false religions. They weren't following the God's commandments. They were not kneeling to God. So these are just rogue situations. And so what I'm arguing isn't that despotism is good or that might makes right. Might, when wielded in service to God, is right, and might, when it is wielded in rebellion against God, is wrong. And every king can do either. They could have the blessing of God to rule and use it to undermine the will of God, and then God will not bless their kingdom. God blesses those who try to do His will, and if you F around, you find out, and your kingdom will lose its will cease to be blessed. And that's how it was. And this is the wisdom of the old times. People understood this perfectly well. So then we have the Romans, and the Romans are a special case as well. The Greeks created philosophy, and philosophy is the love of truth. And so they used the intellect that they were given by God. All of us were given an intellect by God in pursuit of the truth. And so without having sort of directly being told through God's word, through the prophets, like the Hebrews were, who then became the church, the ancient Greeks figured out a lot of truth, which is good, by way of using their intellect. The Romans were inspired by the Greeks, and the Romans took Greek philosophy and some of including philosophy about how to run things, and they applied it, and they created the Roman Republic. And at the time, excluding the ancient Hebrew kings, the Roman Republic was, in my view, the greatest system ever created. It was a sincere attempt at just rule, using many real true things that they learned, which was spearheaded, the learning of which was spearheaded by the Greeks and their philosophy. The American system. Okay, so then we have the rise of the true monarchs, the Christian monarchs that did have divine right. Then you have the so-called Reformation, the dividing of the church, which created monarchs that were no longer in communion with God's true church. And these monarchs then were not, they started straying away from the faith and from the truth to the church. And that is the nature of man. However, the Catholic monarchs had a system of checks and balances with the papacy. They had the two pillars. And so if the Catholic king was straying away from what he should be doing, it wasn't perfect by any means. None of this is perfect. None of this is utopia. But the Pope could tell them, hey, you're straying away from the way. And the Pope, being most influential living figure for all of the Catholics, they had a lot of power in that. And if they condemned the action of the king as being unchristian and unworthy of his rule, that could have real tangible effects in his ability to rule, and could lead to the end of his rule and the replacement of him with the next successor. And so this is the way that it would play out. Of course, sometimes you have the spoiled brat king that becomes crappy, but none of the kings live forever, and you have many kings that were saints. So you have the Protestant kings; they no longer have that check and balance with the papacy. They're outside of that realm. They're doing their own thing. So in many ways, America was absolutely correct to overthrow that. But the problem was that they didn't see that the issue wasn't with the monarchy, it was with the rejection of the church Christ founded. So they rejected the monarchy, and they looked, but many of them were Christians, many of them sincere. There also is a whole contingent of Freemasons who had an entirely different and antichrist agenda. But as we know, there were many founding fathers who were sincere Christians who were not Freemasons, and they, had the legacy of knowledge of, the Western civilization. Many of them could read in the original Greek and Latin, and they made an attempt to make what they thought would be the best system of government. And they looked backwards in history to the Romans and their republic, and they created a constitutional republic very much based on the Roman Republic with some adaptation. And in many ways, it was very good. And in many ways, it was an improvement on being a colony of the Protestant British Empire, which was losing its legitimacy. And there's evidence of that. They lost their empire in practically a blink of an eye during and after World War II. In Catholic Europe, they went from the Holy Roman Empire, which was a federation of kingdoms, to expanding their power outwards. I believe that this was right to do. In their approach to doing this, they also looked to Rome. And in some ways, the Catholic Empire, such as the German Empire, the Spanish Empire, took the Catholic monarchy, and in order to project power outwards, they adapted parts of the Roman Empire and their way of doing things, their way of taking over other places while giving them a large degree of freedom. They were using these principles. So the Catholic monarchy became the Catholic Empire, which was a combination of the Catholic monarchy and the Roman Empire. Now, I will say I am not an expert in history. So if there's anything I'm getting wrong, please please tell me if there's a better way to say this, if there's more precise language I could be using. By all means, let me know. So then we have the Age of Empires, and then we have the rise of communism and the world wars. Now, communism was an attack on Christendom. It's what it was. And it created instability, and it created major problems. And as a direct reaction to that is fascism. Now, fascism was an attempt to regain the stability, greatness, and legitimacy of the tragically crumbling monarchies and places now gone monarchies as a result of World War I and a result of, in Russia, the Russian Revolution, although fascism never was in Russia, actually, ironically. But without the benefit of the royal lineage and without divine right. Now, the papacy could have crowned a fascist leader and given it the legitimacy of divine right, and it didn't. So they never had the divine right, never was a fully legitimate form of government. But it was an attempt to stave off modernity and communism and all of these things that I'm rejecting, that we are rejecting, and preserve the greatness and strength of the old way of doing things. Europe, the solution of Europe and of Russia is quite simple. Go back to Catholic Church and restore the monarchies. And they're actually destined to do so. A Catholic mystic named Mary Julie Jahenny, who had stigmata and lived at the end of the 1800s and early 1900s, predicted this. She predicted a great deal of other things correctly that already happened. And her prediction is rapidly approaching coming true. Before it made any sense for anyone to predict that Europe would have a civil war between the native people and foreigners, and the native, she predicted that would happen, and they're on the brink of it now. So I'm a big believer in, this isn't Catholic doctrine. She has not been granted sainthood. Her predictions have not been co-signed by the Catholic Church, but I believe that they will. I'm a strong believer that she is right, and we're headed towards this quickly. And she predicts that after a brutal civil war in Europe, the native people will emerge victorious, and they will restore monarchy, and a French king will rule Europe and oversee a tremendous resurgence and return to Christianity and Christendom in a time of peace. So we have that to look forward to, or the Europeans do. In Russia, several political philosophers have either directly or indirectly advocated for the restoration of the monarchy there. The Romanovs had the longest lasting dynasty outside of China in the world. They ruled Russia for 400 years, one family. The Russians have undergone a serious examination of themselves since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Before the Soviet Union, before the Bolshevik Revolution, the assassination of Tsar Nicholas II, Russia was great for centuries and centuries. And Russia was Russia. And what is Russia? It is a Christian kingdom and also federation, sort of similar to the Holy Roman Empire, in which there were sub-kingdoms with varying degrees of autonomy. And it even included, Russia is a little different in that the Russian monarchs, the Kaiser, often oversaw Muslim kingdoms. And the Muslim kings could exercise some degree of autonomy, but in some ways they could not. They had to respect the crown, and they had to respect that the crown was Christian. And it is very fascinating. I wish I knew a lot more about it. There's so much to learn about this stuff. It's a problem with being a big picture guy is I know a little about a lot, but I think I have an ability to connect things across many different disciplines. But I do struggle in some details, so I may get some details wrong. And that's just the way it is. Alexander Dugin, the greatest philosopher of our time from Russia, while he hasn't advocated directly for the restoring of the monarchy, he certainly has expressed what I just said about that, what made Russia what it is. The Bolsheviks destroyed that, and they tried to make Russia into something totally alien to itself. And they succeeded for a while, and then that, of course, collapsed, not having God's blessing, not really having solid foundations to stand on. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia had a brief period of time in which it thought, well, we'll just be like America. And they tried, and they didn't like it. And then Putin came along, and he started bringing... He's representative of the movement. He's not responsible for all of this. Russia remembered who it was, and that is they're a great power, and they're Christian. And they a tremendous amount of martyrs were created during the Soviet Union. One guy I saw recently in an interview, a Russian, said that there were more Christian martyrs during the Soviet Union than all of the rest of Russia's history combined. And because of the blood of those martyrs, we now see the Christian resurgence that is defining what Russia is today. Now, what would it mean to restore the monarchy? Some people get hung up on the Romanovs and Anastasia and whether or not she escaped. Now, that would be exciting and cool. Apparently, that's been disproven. I don't necessarily believe that it's disproven, but they say that in DNA testing they did find her body. I don't know about that. There's the legend that Anastasia, the youngest daughter of Nicholas II, when they were all murdered in cold blood by Jewish Bolsheviks, did escape, and her great-granddaughter or something like that, maybe great-great-granddaughter or son, is alive and is the rightful heir to the throne, and that Putin knows this. It's a fun theory, and Putin plans to reinstall them. That'd be awesome. However, it's not necessary. The Romanovs had a lot of other family that does exist. There absolutely is someone who would be the rightful heir to the throne in Russia. Now, America's different. We've never had a king here. We don't like the monarchy in England such that it is. They are Protestants such that they're even Christian. They don't seem like it. They seem like absolute traitors. And we're not going back in that direction. But there's another direction we can go that'll lead us to an even greater place. The future of America is uncertain. And I don't know of any prophecies that prophesize what I'm going to suggest should happen and what I will fight. And if necessary, I believe would be willing to die for this vision. The restoring of Christendom. A guy that I've met who has presence on Twitter, Anglo-Zoomer, introduced me to this idea. He suggested that as America adopted adopted a government inspired by the early Roman Republic, it too would follow the trajectory of Rome and go from Roman Republic to empire ruled by an emperor. This is like the left's greatest fear, that Trump will crown himself emperor or his son Baron emperor. And this is sort of like a somewhat tongue-in-cheek, to use a crude term, wet dream of the right. Regardless of the Trump family, perhaps this doesn't happen for another 500 years. I don't see how we survive that long, though, without something like this happening. There becomes an American emperor. And what would happen next, what could happen next, what we should fight to happen next, also mirrors the Roman Empire. And so this is not anti-American. It is not about the past. It's about the might of the Roman Empire, the nobility of a Catholic monarch, the blessing of the Pope, divine right, the truth of Catholicism, and the wisdom of the Roman and American Republic in terms of a way of governance. What would happen would be that an emperor of America would be a modern Constantine and make Christianity the official religion of the American Empire, and that then a modern-day Pope Leo III would formally coronate that or a subsequent emperor as king under Christ, giving them divine right, thus creating a Western Empire with all of the best elements of Rome, the Holy Roman Empire, and America. A way that I find so poetic and beautiful that it could be a flawed but directionally true description of God's plan. All that would have to happen after that for the full glory of Christendom to be restored, but at a new height never achieved in our past, would be for the unification of the East and West, the unification of the Orthodox and Catholic churches, and the either unification or probably sort of a right pillar and a left pillar powers of the East, the Eastern Church, the Russian Empire, and the West, the American Empire, the Atlanticist Empire, with Europe in the center, all coming together, at least in cooperation under Christ to do God's will. I see this or something like this as the full expression of authority on earth as inspired by Christ. I see this as we know that Christ wins in the end. We know that as Christians that there will be an end to the world as we know it, that heaven and earth will become one. New Jerusalem will descend on the earth, and we will live in the presence of God, in harmony with God, all those of us who are saved by Christ's suffering on the cross. What we don't know is how successful humans will be in bringing earth before that happens to Christ. We know that God will save us, but we also know that humans are capable of royally screwing things up. A funny phrase there. So I'm not saying these things are going to happen. I'm saying this is a way to put the earth back right on earth. And I strongly believe that while God has infinite contingency plans for us messing things up while still arriving at the end, the perfect culmination of his plan. And as Christians, as men, as leaders, or those of us who feel that God wants us to lead, we have a responsibility to understand these things and try to guide history, and for some very few of us, be a catalyzing figure, be a great man of history, and move us in this direction, and to defeat evil and destroy, take away the power of those who are the enemies of God. So, yeah, that is what I just expressed to you is the culmination of, trying to find the truth my entire life. And I hope you gained something from it. Please give me your feedback. Yeah, like I said, I'm joking about being a genius. I'm no dummy. But I do think true genius is when sort of capability meets results. And so far my results, I have a good family, and I'm generally respected and appreciated in my community. And beyond that's sort of that's hardly the work of a great genius, but yeah, I got a lot of years left. We'll see what happens. But anyway, I don't know. I have the millennial habit of sort of self-deprecation and talking myself up to cycle, trying to break it. I am still a product of my time, and I am a millennial. And as an aside, one of the things I really love to see, every generation rejects things that the previous generation did, and the Gen Z rejection of like just making a habit out of self-deprecation that we did. Good on you guys. Thanks for doing that. So, how long did I talk? I did that in an hour. Cool. Yeah, my voice has constantly been a little weak. Normally I can talk more like this. It's a little bit more resonant. That's going to sound better. So, anyway, it's just the nature of doing streams every day, I guess. Okay, well, let's end it there. Thank you guys so much. I'll definitely make a couple clips of this, and I'll see you tomorrow. May God bless you, and God bless Europe, God bless Russia, God bless America, God bless all of us. Good night.